Welcome. Welcome to my Geography Paper 3 video. Today we'll be going through the Geography Paper 3 for 2024. And Paper 3 consists of three topics: people and the biosphere, forest and the threat, and consuming energy resources. Along with that, it will also include two 8 markers along with a 16 marker. That will also include bags and etc. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did anything, make sure to comment it down below. Thank you. Okay, good day. So we've got the geography paper 3 here. So we've got the resource booklet and the exam paper. The resource booklet is normally enclosed inside this exam paper, but to make it easier for myself and to make it easier to make it understand to you guys, I put it out separately. However, in the exam itself, this will be enclosed inside the exam paper, so please make sure to update that. So let's have a look through it. So it says use section A, pages 2 and 3 and 4 in the resource booklet to answer the questions. So just use the resource booklet, then we have to use this booklet. So if you open it, we've got figure 1. We've also got the introduction of Ecuador's rainforest. We've got figure 2 of the tropical rainforest. We got that for land section. However, we got second focus yet. So, figure 1. What is figure 1? Figure 1 is right here. It says figure 1, the three main geographical regions of Ecuador. So, first question are, identify the geographical region where the capital Quito is located. Quito is located in the resource booklet near Ecuador, but it is right here. Therefore, if we look on here, the three geographical education regions of Ecuador: the coastal zone, which is this brown area, the yellow, which shows the mountains of Andes, which is right here, the Amazon rainforest, which is right here in somewhere near Peru. We also know where is Ecuador, but yeah, we don't know that yet. However, Quito is labelled inside the yellow area. That means it is the Andes Mountains. You can get marked for saying Andes or mountain, but I prefer to make Andes Mountain just to be safe. Now, next question. It says, identify the best estimate of the area of the rainforest region in figure 1. Looking back on figure 1, said making the best estimate of the rainforest region in this area. So the only rainforest we got is the Amazon rainforest, which takes up this much. Now, looking at the options here, we've got 7.5 kilometers squared. Obviously, that's way too much. 750,000 kilometers squared. Still, that's a lot of land. Some 5,000 kilometers squared. Yes, this might work because it's this small of an area. It's not really gonna take up like a whole another earth, is it? Some 500 kilometers squared would be a little bit too small. Like a little too small like this. So, what's the obvious answer? The obvious answer is obviously C, which shows 75,000 kilometers squared. Next question. It says, using figure 1 and using your own knowledge that you learned in your geography course, explain one physical reason about why rainforest cannot grow in dark parts of Ecuador. Now, looking back in figure 1, we've got this rainforest here, but it's asking, well, why can't it grow anywhere else? And it's not a really obvious answer because rainforest cannot grow in the mountains. Because it's the mountains. Why on earth will there be a rainforest in the mountains? It would all be very deep. Like that's why I don't even know if habitats would live there anymore, but God knows. So that will be one mark. We can say that rainforest cannot grow in the mountains because it is too cold. You got 1 mark for saying rainforest cannot grow in the mountains, and then you got to explain why, because this is an explain question. So you got to say because it grows is too cold. You got another mark for saying that. You got 4 marks for saying this answer. Quick and easy marks. Easy as that. Not any. However, if you do link about human urbanization, unfortunately you do not get a mark. So that is your mistake on that one. However, for next question, it says here, to study figure 2, identify the year when the area of tropical rainforest loss was larger. We've got 2001, 2010, 2013, 2016, 2016. Anyway, looking back on figure 2, we got the different things. Shows the tropical rainforest, the taiga, temperate forest, and shows how forests are cut down to provide resources. Climate change also affects the distribution of health of the forest. This shows the area of forest loss, 3,000 kilometers squared. Now, it says here, the question asked, identify the year when the area of tropical rainforest loss was the larger. You look through here, you can start from 2001 to 2016. Look through all the options. So, first option A, 2001. Look on 2001, it was only here, which we can say is an estimate of about 65, something like that. Or 67.5, I'm not sure. But I know that's not the highest, certainly. We got 2010. 2010 would be somewhere here, which is over 100 years. 100 kilometers squared. So draw that line. The mark, that is only 100 kilometers squared. However, for 2013, you look on 2013, we got this marking, then we line it up, and we only get below 2009, obvious no, and we got 2016, which is right here, and we mark it here. This is the highest data pool, and it shows around 127.5, something like that, and it's the biggest out of all. Therefore 2016 is the highest. Mark that down. Next question. Using figure 2, we've got figure 2 is asked, using figure 2 and your own knowledge, suggest 2 reasons why the distribution of Earth's biomes is changing over time. So, you get 1 mark for the basic reason, but based on what you got from figure 2, and you get a further mark for explaining it because it's a suggestion question, and you got to state 2 of them, which can get you an easy 4 mark. So, for example, you can just start with saying that all types of forests are being cut down to provide resources, such as logging for timber in the taiga, or for deforestation in the taiga. Like that, by saying all types of forests are being cut down to provide resources in the taiga, wait no, this is what I meant to state for my examples, sorry about that. It is, for example, deforestation in the taiga Now, you got one mark for basic reason, which says all types of forests are being cut down to provide resources. One mark. And then you got another mark with further explanation. So, for example, deforestation and Tega, that's another mark. So, easy 3 marks right there. The black reason you could say is that trees may not survive in areas where climate change means temperature and rainfalls are changing because the biomes are adapted to particular atmospheres or climates. So you could get an answer like this. Trees may not survive in areas where climate change means temperatures are changing because biomes are adapted to particular climate. Like I said before, 1 mark for basic reason. So trees may not survive in areas where climate change means temperatures are changing. And then you get a further explanation by saying because biomes are adapted to particular climate. Another mark, easy 4 marker, easy as that, not very complicated. Next one is section B. Flip on to section B in this booklet. So a resource booklet. It's about forest under threat. You'll learn this in the GCSE spec. Now, it said use section B, page 5 and 6 in the resource booklet to answer the question. Look on figure 3 here. We've got figure 3 here. So, it said using information in figure 3, calculate the total estimated value of the oil located below Ecuador's rainforest. This is a part of a newspaper article about Ecuador's failed rainforest protection plan. So that in 2007, Ecuador government proposed a rainforest protection plan. The oil resources below the forest would be left in the ground if other countries donated $3.5 billion to Ecuador, which is half the estimated value of the oil. At first, there was positive response, especially with the environmentalists. Germany and Italy offered money. The United Nations said it would manage the fund, but the other countries compared Ecuador's plan to blackmail because drilling for oil was threatened unless money was given. Other countries wanted to know more about how their money would be used, and by 2013 the project had gone. So, it said the world had failed us, said the Ecuador president. Complained, accusing the other government of not being serious enough about fighting deforestation and climate change. That is it. Now, it said, using information in figure 3, calculate the total estimated value of the oil located in Ecuador's forest. So, we got $3.5 billion to Ecuador. However, it's half the estimated area. So if we timed it by 2, 3.5 times by 2, that's equal to 7. Therefore, it is $7 billion. A lot of money. More than me. Anyway, using your own knowledge, identify one climate characteristic of tropical rainforest areas. Options include the rainfall is low throughout the year. Option B, the rainfall is much higher in summer. Option C, the temperature is much lower in summer. And option D, the temperature is high throughout the year. Now, we've got to find out what one climate characteristic of the tropical rainforest areas This will obviously be D because the temperature is always high throughout the year. Like barely any rainfall, not really cold throughout the year. Otherwise, habitats won't live there through here, so forest fires are also common. However, rainfall is high throughout the whole year. So, it says here, so that question, it says, study figure 4, calculate the total percentage of countries who are not REDD members. So, if you look back on those at the table, so our table shows various things, such as world region, the total countries where rainforest is found, and who are in the REDD members. The only thing we need to know about is this table, this row, where it says no for rainforest countries who are in REDD members. For now, so for Africa, 13 are not in the REDD members. Asia Pacific, only one person is not in the REDD. South America, only 3 people are not in the REDD, and overall total it is 17 people. So it says that if calculate the total percentage of countries who are not REDD members. So if for people who are not REDD members, we could just calculate off here. So we know that people who are members and people who are not members. Therefore, we could say that 70.7 are members. You look on here because it's a percent or who are members, so 17.7. So therefore, it means that 29.3 are not, because if we do 100% minus 70.3, that equals to a total of 29.3%. Therefore, 29.3% are not REDD members, and that's that. Now, next one. It said here, Figure 4 mentions sites. Identify the main purpose of sites. Love sites. It protects our endangered animals. Help protect the orangutans. My personal favourite, orangutan, and stuff like that. So, it's the first option. It's a preventing trade of endangered animal and animal species. The option B says preserving the culture of rainforest communities. Option C says funding education about sustainable development. Option D says supporting tropical rainforests through resource projects. Now, all of them, you can obviously see the first one. It says preventing trade of endangered plant and animal species. That is an obvious yes. Because all the answers are already self-evidently wrong. There is no saying, but this could happen. No, CITE is only meant to protect trade of endangered plants and animals. So if you don't learn about CITES, got to learn this. This is a very key factor that will come in every year. Next question, it says here, using figure 3 and figure 4, explain one strength and one weakness of global action to protect rainforest. We've got figure 4 here. Along with that, we also got figure 3. We would have read through this, and we got the table here. So, if you want to have a look at the back of that, feel free to. However, our question states that we must explain one strength, one weakness of global action to protect rainforest. Therefore, you get 1 mark for based on figures 3 and 4, and another mark of 1 will be 2, like 1 exclamation for this, 1 exclamation for this. Each exclamation can take 2 marks. Therefore, this will link to 4 marks. So, for strength, we could say that is an opportunity for richer countries to work with poor countries to protect their forest. For example, you would learn a range of countries for paper trade. So you could state an example by saying, for example, Norway donated $5 million to REDD. That's that. You get 1 mark for a reason. It says opportunities for richer countries to work with poor countries to protect the forest. It's 1 mark. And then you state an example by saying, for example, Norway donated $5 million to REDD. You get 1 mark, 2 marks right there. Now for the weakness, you could state by saying like the amount of money provided by the richer countries are not enough to stop this deforestation. Therefore, Norway is the main donor for REDD and only gave $5 million US. So that's the answer we can give. Or you could state about the value of Ecuador's oil, which is in billions of dollars, which is vastly more greater than the $5 million that Norway has given to REDD. However, it always depends on what you pick. However, I am going to pick about the amounts of money provided by richer countries are not enough to stop deforestation. However, Norway is the main donor for REDD. And only gave $5 million. So, you get 1 mark for the reason by saying the amount of money provided by richer countries are not enough to stop deforestation. 1 mark. And then you explain it by saying Norway is the main donor for REDD and it's only $5 million. That's an easy 4 mark. Not too complicated. Just got to use your knowledge and put your head in the game. Section C. Now this is where it starts to get a little bit more complicated. However, it is start time to start switching to section C in our resource booklet. Let's go for that. Now, our question asks, using section C, pages 7 to 12 in the resource booklet to answer the question, so study figure 5, right here, figure 5, and it said identify Ecuador's most valuable export, sorry. Now, if you look on here, the most valuable export for Ecuador, if you look through the whole thing, it says value of 3 main exports. There's either oil products, fish and seafood, bananas. We have eyes. We can obviously see that fish and seafood had the most money. Therefore, we could say that fish and seafood is the most valuable export. For the next question, it says figure 5 provides information about Ecuador's population size and population growth in 2021. Calculate the size of Ecuador's population in millions in 2022. Now we got option A, which said 18.00. We got option B saying 18.25. Option C for saying 18.75. Option D for saying 19.40. Looking back on figure 5, we must calculate the size of Ecuador's population in millions. That the rationale, which means that 18 million is growing, because it states here, population size, 18 million people lived in Ecuador in 2021, population growing at 1.4% a year. Therefore, if we do 18 times 1.4 and then divide it by 100, you would therefore get, which means 22,552,000 in population growth. Therefore, we can say that 18.25 is the closest. Now, for that question, we'll open up resource booklet to value figure 6. Get that. And if I cut this out. Look here, we got figure 6. We got our GDPs and changes in GDP per person in Ecuador. We look at this. It says study figure 6. Identify one physical cause of reduced economic growth in Ecuador. Now, I would say that flooding can be a main factor, because if we study this again, it said about COVID-19, it said about the flooding, and it shows about the oil prices. However, the easiest one we can say is that COVID was at its highs, so we can say that COVID is one. Our next question asks, using figure 5 and 6, suggest 2 reasons why Ecuador's consumption of energy has grown at a faster rate than its population. Now, the maxim says in each case, or each reason, you have to award 1 mark for reasons based on figures 5 and 6, from what you learned in the resource booklet, and another mark for further explanation, which could count up to a full 4 marks. For example, our first reason, we could talk about how the GDP per person has risen. This will mean that each person has more income to buy things that use energy. So we could say GDP per person has risen from 1,000 to 6,000%, and this means that each person has more income to buy things that use energy. You get 1 mark for a reason, which the GDP per person has risen from 1,000 to 6,000%. And you got a further mark for explanation, which by saying this means that each person has more income by buying things that use energy. Another mark. That's your 2 mark for your 1 reason. The easiest one you can also talk about for the second reason is talk about COVID. Now you can say that during COVID, more people work from home because COVID was a bad thing. We all got locked down. We had to stay at home. Parents have to go and do work from home just to make the money. So during COVID, more people worked from home, It adds to the energy demand. Now for C, it says Figure 7 shows how oil production can have a negative impact on the environment. You could say, using your own knowledge, explain two ways in which renewable energy production can also have a negative impact on the environment. In each case, you could say that you can award 1 mark for basic reason, as said before, and find a mark for development, which can show up to 4 marks. You can talk about how hydroelectric power involves a flooding of valleys, which lead to the loss of habitats or landscapes. So we can talk about HEP, aka hydroelectric power, and we could say involves floodings of valley which lead to a loss of habitat. So you got 1 mark for saying HEP involve flooding of valleys, another mark for saying which lead to a loss of habitat, another mark, easy to mark like that, nothing too much to write about. For the second reason, you could talk about wind power or solar power. Anything is your choice. I feel comfortable with solar power. I love solar. So solar power, plants may lead to a lot of large areas of natural vegetation and biodiversity loss. As discussed before, 1 mark for saying basic reasons, another mark for basic explanation or development, which I talked about development here, so that's easy to mark, not much to write about, considering how much there is. And your 8 marker, we do not love 8 markers, but we have to do it anyway, which sucks. So, for our 8 marker, we'll talk about mainly using evidence for figure 7 and 8 to assess the threat into Yosemite National Park, aka MP, and its communities. Look on here, we go to figure 7, which is oil production in the Ecuador rainforest, and we've got figure 8. Ignore this, but figure 8, which is showed about our map here about the non-rainforest period, rainforest where oil exploration is allowed, fully protected national park, which is both white and brown, it just partly protected, however oil exploration is allowed. Not a good thing either. To start off with that 8 marker, it says using evidence, assess. Assess just means identifying the benefit and negative of it by using point, explain, and development, and then linking. That's what I've used the structure for this. However, I want to structure the question by using the positive and negative of assessing the threat of YNP and all the communities, and then do an overall on environmental threat and the benefit of oil development. However, so let's start. We can say that oil development brings important economic benefit for Ecuador, a large share of the country's oil reserve, which lies in this region. Therefore, oil extraction provides major national income and supports government spending. I'll also stating that the construction of roads and pipelines can also improve access to remote areas, creating jobs and economic development. That's your AO3. Next one, we could talk about AO4 by saying, however, the threat shown in the figures are severe. Forest clearances for roads and pipelines destroys habitats and lead to long-term soil erosion. In which tropical forests struggle to recover from. Which this puts species, or you could say rare species, that you could take examples, but I don't want to. If you want to do it, you can, but yeah. Getting back would contribute to diversity loss with global consequences. And that's that. And you can also talk about how the only part of parks, because if you look back on figure 8, you can clearly see that some parts of the park aren't fully protected. Like this part you can. However, for the grey with brown bits, that is partly protected. So meaning that people can do whatever the fuck they want on the area. Meaning we could say that only part of the park are fully protected. Leaving large areas exposed to damage. In which indigenous groups also face major threats to their way of life. And oil roads allow loggers and hunters deeper access into the forest. Which increases conflict and cultural disruption. Like that. Then we want to talk about the conclusion overall, which is the overall assessment of all these threats and all the things we've learned. We've got to say our opinion as well, which means that overall, while all development provides a clear economic benefit for Ecuador, the environmental and social threats got no one can't go back to that. Move on to that page. Should be asking social threats are far more severe and often reversible. And we can also talk about the long-term loss of Ecuador, so the long-term loss of biodiversity, permanent soil damage, and risk to isolated indigenous communities, outweigh the short-term economic gains. making oil extraction in this region highly unsustainable. And that's that. That's the 48 mark. And you got AO3, AO4, and conclusion. Overall, makes a marker. Pretty good answer if you ask me, but yeah. That's that. Let's move on to the next question. Says, study figure 9. Identify 2 actions taken by the rainforest community to protect our land. You got 2 reasons here. We've got to find out which one fits best. So you see here that we've got a picture here, and we've got Ecuador's rainforest communities are now taking action to protect our land. In 2019, Quito, a marked by the rainforest community, drew attention to the government's failure to safeguard their rights. One community won a law case against the government for failing to consult them before opening up their act and crystal land to oil drilling. And the court ruled that oil companies must leave. Local communities blocked roads to prevent the arrival of drilling equipment. As a result, a Chinese company stopped its charge for oil near Yashudi. That's that. But some rainforest communities are open to the idea of working with oil farms, so as long as they benefit too. And to cut out. So, instead, identify 2 actions taken by the rainforest. Based on what we learned, we can show that there was a march and there was a legal case. Not much to write, just a single word answer or 2 words, but yeah, you got 1 mark, 2 out, simple like that. They give away marks for free. 3 marks right there. Anyway, so study figure 10 mentioned unconventional fossil fuels using your knowledge. Take 2 unconventional fossil fuel sources. You got to take 2 reasons here. Look at the 2 reasons, and you got to use figure 10. So that figure 10 would then be this. Figure 10 is just about how USA has the most economic development countries, which is brown, which includes USA, UK, and other development countries, such as like Germany, France, etc. Economic emerging countries such as India, China, which we have here, and we've got economic development countries such as Haiti, Bangladesh, and etc. They're blue. I'll show all the stuff we have to read here, but I'm not going to read it. So it said, use your own knowledge from what you learned from the GCSE back, name 2 unconventional fossil fuel sources. So from what we can say that tar sands are one, and we can also say that tight gas are also one. I'll state what we learned on figure 10. Now, for the 8 marker, hefty but not too hefty. What I would say this by is assessing by the most responsible and the most least responsible, because this 8 marker specifically answers using evidence from figure 10, which we have here. It said assess which countries are most and least responsible for carbon dioxide over time. We can talk about 1 paragraph with this, another paragraph with this, and then the overall assessment of it, because this is called assess. So, we can talk about the AO3, which aka is the most responsible. We can talk about developed countries, are overwhelmingly responsible for historical CO2 emissions, which contributes 58.5% of the total. 2000 GT recorded. This reflects centuries of industrial activity, especially in countries such as the USA and UK. These nations industrialized early and relied on fossil fuels, like coal, oil, gases, etc., barely using any renewable energy, which explains their dominant share. China also stands out, having 15% emission, which is equal to the combined emissions of all other emerging countries such as India, Pakistan, etc. And China, of course. Now, we could say what this highlights. We could say this highlights it's industrial, or we could say it's rapid, just to be safe. In decades. Because obviously what we learned here is made by decades and over time. Now, if we talk about the least responsible, we could say, however, developing countries have contributed just over 10.4%, despite being home to the world's population. For example, Ecuador has emitted only 0.1%, showing how small its impact been. These figures suggest a major imbalance in responsibility. And I'm going to talk about evidence, so say the data also includes deforestation, which might otherwise increase the share of some tropical countries. Although the overall contribution remains low. And that's your least evidence. Now I've got to talk about the conclusion, nice and short, by saying the data showing a clear inequality and we could make them colon by saying developed nations bear the historical responsibility back on that page by saying for emissions while developing and emerging countries had contributed less to CO2 emissions. This gap shows implications for climate justice and future emission targets. Especially when population size and per capita emissions are considered. And that's that for the marker. End of section C.